Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the GWAT Fob podcast, brought to you by Combat Outpost Robinson, doing great things for our veterans. I'm your host, Jim Robinson, and today we got a young lady on the show. She is a TedX speaker and a keynote speaker. She is co-author of the anthology Wounds to Wisdom. She's a workshop story coach and storyteller. She's the liaison for Families of the Fallen with Last Out and Task Force Pineapple. She's a Gold Star mother to Senior Airman Daniel J. Johnson, which was killed in action October 5th, 2010 in Afghanistan. Miss Holly Higgins Staudacher. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's wonderful to get to meet you again.
Absolutely. For those of you watching, Holly and I actually did her interview last week, and something happened, and it accidentally got deleted. So here we are again. So, things happen. You get your little technical glitches and stuff and everything. So hopefully we can recreate the wonderful interview that she did last week, because it was a very good interview. So, Holly, again, I want to apologize for having to have you on again. And won't you start off?
That was a dress rehearsal.
Well, okay. Yeah, we can go with that. Yeah, Holly and I have actually known each other for a while, and we've talked back and forth. And this is, we finally got to meet, by doing this podcast, and looking forward to getting to know each other, better as things progress forward. So, Holly, won't you give us a little insight into, who Danny was and what he was like growing up, and how he finally decided to, join the Air Force, because I know that was not one of your favorite times. So give us a little insight.
Very difficult time. Yeah, Danny was the third of four sons. And he was the one, I guess, that always seemed to live his life with an urgency. That's the only that, and when other friends of his and people who knew him look back, they also, the word that comes up is radical. He was just so radically determined to do everything the best he could do it. And I think some of it's at birth order. He had two older brothers. Felt like he was in their shadows. So he chose they were all athletes, but he had to choose different sports than they did, and worked his butt off to be the best he could, which most kids do. But there was something unique. Danny would be up at 4:00 every morning to go out and swim, because swim team was, his brothers were football, basketball, track. So he did football too, but his focus was swim team and pole vaulting, which they didn't do, and he just worked really hard. And I always sensed in him, I don't think I read it, correctly at the time, but there was a sense of urgency. Or I guess I should say I did sense that, but I wasn't, like, he always just had to be, doing. And every kid does this, I know, but Danny's was exceptional, I have to say. People remember him also as always, he was very concerned, taking care of others around him too. That was really important to him. And he made that obvious. Serving was he always wanted to serve. He didn't talk about the military. He did talk about being a firefighter, an EMT, and a paramedic, which he worked in college. He did do, he was getting his civil engineering degree. He also got fire science, and became an EMT, and was working on his paramedic qualifications. A story, and I don't know if I told you this last time, but one that I think of sometimes when I describe Daniel, is something that I was told at his funeral. The one, not the military one, but the one that was that we had in the hometown. He graduated from high school, and so it was just packed with all the high school students, even though he was 23 when he was killed. But so everybody came when those young kids die, and long lines. And this young man came up to me in his early 20s, and I didn't know him. A lot of them I knew, but this kid, I had never met him, never heard his name spoken in the home with all the boys. But he wanted me to know, when he was a freshman in high school, Daniel was a senior, and he was playing, like I said, he did play football. And this young man was wanted me to know that he had always dreamed of performing, and he was a singer and a dancer, and that was his thing, and arts and theater. And it was the first year that the school let boys be on the cheerleading team, and that to him was just perfect. He did all the stunts and the athletics and on the team. But that was one of the first games of the season. He's a freshman. He said that he's out there with the team, and from the grandstands, a lot of kids were making fun of him, bullying him, laughing. It's a guy doing that. And just, he felt absolutely devastated and deflated.
Right.
And he ended up sitting down on the bench. He couldn't take it anymore. And during halftime, Daniel, when the team was leaving to go into the locker room, Daniel broke away and ran over to him, and must obviously had seen what had happened, and sat down next to him, put his arm on his shoulder, and said to him, "Don't let them steal your dreams. This is who you are. Don't let them take that from you. Nobody has that right." And apparently he sat with him the whole halftime, and this kid said he knew that Daniel knew he was going to get in trouble from the coach for not being with the team. But he stayed with them, and he kept his arm on his shoulders, all the way around his shoulders the whole time, sat there with him. And when the halftime was over and the team came out, he goes, "Now we're going to stand up together. I'm going to go back in the field, and you're going to go back with your squad." And that's what happened. And for the rest of the year, he said, when they pass each other, they didn't have the same crowd in school or do the same, social activities or anything, but they'd pass in school. Daniel would always make eye contact with them, and a couple times check in on him and say, "What's going on?" and stuff like that. And this young man said, because of Daniel, when this kid was 14, because of Daniel, he is now in the arts and in performing and involved in theater and doing all the things that means so much to his spirit. And
that's great.
That was the kind of kid Daniel was. He just cared. He had such a compassionate, tender heart. And that was the other thing that I think people remember about him, his tender heart. And so when he came home from college one spring and told me that he was not going to go back for a while, he was going to enlist in the Air Force, my heart just fell to my feet. I had a very negative attitude at that time, which is not my proudest thing to admit to, but I had a very negative attitude toward our military based on my childhood and my father serving and having been a combat veteran and having brought the war home with him, and not really getting any help. He dealt with it by drinking and drinking and drinking. And he finally did get treatment, but it wasn't until the damage was done to his body and our family and all of his relationships. And so he had 2 years he lived in sobriety. And toward the end, I was the only person left that was in his life. I was his youngest child, and just couldn't let go because everyone else had. And then he got help, and I was a part of that, his treatment. And so shortly before he died, he told me he learned about storytelling, which I now know is so powerful, and healing, and what it does for our brains and helps our brains heal and our hearts. And he got involved and stayed sober those last 2 years with AA, and they use storytelling. They tell their stories, and that helps them to heal. So he shared with me one combat story, and it's such a horrific story that I knew immediately that it answered all the whys that I had cried myself to sleep with as a child. And I understood him better, of course. It
Right.
was so horrific. I'll never repeat it to another soul. I can't. It's too horrible. And but what I did do with it was make, in the wisdom of a 21-year-old, I blamed the U.S. military for the damage to our family. And he died shortly after sharing that with me. And so after I received his flag, I remember leaving the cemetery and telling myself, I will never, ever have any relationship with that organization. So, and then all these years later, my sons never got to meet my dad, but they knew a little bit. They knew he served, I think. Yeah, they did, but they didn't know much. So here at that time, 19-year-old son was telling me that he was going to follow in the footsteps of my father. That's all I heard.
Right.
And it was, and I spent that whole summer, well, we call that the summer of discussion in our family, but it was really Danny discussing and me crying the whole summer and praying in my heart that I would get the words that would talk him out, find the words that would talk him out of this insanity, which is what I looked at it at that time. And shortly before the end of the summer, he was notified that he was part of a group of exceptional recruits that was being sworn in by a general at a special ceremony at the Chicago Air and Water Show. And he wanted, of course, for me to be there. And I had no intention of it, because to me, that would be supporting him in making a choice that I felt was really a bad choice. And so one hot August afternoon, and this was in 2006, he came 20 years ago now, almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was out in the garden, and he quietly came out and kneeled down in the dirt with me and started pulling weeds. Didn't say anything. So as a mom, I knew he wanted something. And of course, I knew what it was, because it was the week before that weekend. And so I rocked up on my heels, and I looked up at that deep blue sky, and I begged God for the magic words that would change his mind. And then I looked at him, and I just said from my heart, this is so hard for me because I love you so much, and I'm afraid. And the minute I said those words, I thought, oh man, I've always taught him that love is greater than fear. Now I'm talking about letting fear rule my choice, my decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized then in that moment that those were the magic words. They didn't change his mind, but they changed my heart.
Right.
And I could tell him, I love you enough. Enough. I love you so much that fear just is not important here. I have to let that go. And so my husband and I went to that swearing in, and it was, most honorable and noble ceremony we had at that point ever witnessed. And I told Danny how humbled I was by it. And then he graduated from basic training in Lackland, and we were there for that. And he was in the top 10%. And that one was admitting to him how impressed I was with the transition and the transformation in him as he talked about what integrity meant to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what they do to those young boys is just incredible. And it's in a very short amount of time. I mean, they get a whole new outlook on life. They become a totally different person. And I'll tell you what, when my son went through, basic AIT, and, we got to go to, the ceremonies and all that stuff. It was amazing. So I understand.
The crazy thing, I have to say, is how prior to my little transformation, how I looked at basic, I was terrified, because I knew of some kids who don't get through it. And it kind of, my perspective was it can devastate them. It can destroy their spirits. And I can't explain what happens to the ones who don't, but the ones who do, we know they can come out of that just with a much greater, standing taller, a much deeper respect and love for their country. And, and Danny did always, I mentioned, he always wanted to serve. He never mentioned military before, but he did, when Katrina hit, he got involved with the Red Cross. He was like, I told you what he was studying. He was always wanting to help others. And he told me that when I asked him why the military, he did say, I want to do something bigger and more important than what I'm doing right now that will make a difference for other people in this world. And I mean, what can you say? And I remember him saying, I want to earn respect. And I'm like, well, with that attitude, you deserve respect. I couldn't a lot of respect. And then he from basic, then he did the naval school explosive ordnance disposal, and he didn't tell me when he first started it. He just what the acronym stood for. He just said, "I'm just doing EOD, Mom, and I'm in the Air Force, and there's no infantry, so I won't be." He knew but my dad. My issues with my dad was that he was damaged by what he had done and what he had witnessed and been exposed to. And so Daniel was trying to, protect. He knew I was worried that if he had to defend himself, that would hurt his heart. And so he would tell me, well, there's no infantry. I'm doing this thing called EOD. It's really cool. It's really specialized and elite. It's hard to get into. And I'm like, okay, cool. I was busy with life with all these other kids because I also have 3 daughters. So I just kind of blew it off. But his, while he was training before the graduation, of course, by then I would have seen what the acronym stood for when we drove in. But before that, his brother, who also was going into the Army, was telling me, oh, Mom, EOD stands for explosive ordnance disposal. And I was like, what?
Right.
Bombs? And he goes, yeah, and since they don't have an infantry, he'll get attached to all the other branches. And I'm going, but what? And he goes, yeah, they go before the infantry, in front of the infantry to clear the way for the. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, it takes a special breed of guys and gals that put on that bomb suit, and walk out there and, kneel down and disarm that thing. I mean, just nerves of steel, of steel.
Right. And I'll tell you one thing I want to say quickly. He graduated that first, I know it feels like I'm bragging, but it's really on him, not me. He graduated first round, and that's unusual. With honors. It's actually one of the most difficult technical schools in the Department of War. It's because they have to learn how all the other countries make bombs. I mean, the stuff they learn is insane, and their attrition rate is like 75%. It's really, really bad, really hard. For airmen, of the numbers they gave me is for 500 airmen who start, 125 will finish, and not usually in the first time through. So he was just an amazing, a remarkable kid. That radical determination, that focus, and I forgot what I was going to say something about. He was then stationed at Vandenberg, which is out in California.
Right.
And he loved it because, he loved it, obviously. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The year that the movie The Hurt Locker came out.
Yes.
And it was nominated for all sorts of awards. There's in 2009, for anyone who's watching this that was very young, probably didn't know about it, but it was about an EOD tech and his story. And it was nominated for so many awards that the media in California, like LA and all the way up the coast, all wanted to go to Vandenberg to interview the real EOD techs. And it was just a small group of them. There might have been, I don't know, 12 to 15 in this bit. And Vandenberg is huge. They have a shop, an EOD shop, and just a group. So they, for whatever reason, in their trust of Daniel, they actually had the media interview him. And at that point, I know he was like 22-year-old kid,
Right.
And here we are in the middle of 2 foreign wars, and they let this 22-year-old kid be interviewed by the media about that work.
Right.
And he was so, of course, proud and excited about it. He sent me a clip of it, and so we can still watch that, which is wonderful to be able to hear his voice again. But I know what I say when you were saying this breed. It takes a special breed.
Yes, it does.
He was fairly mature about this interview, because they did say, how does this movie compare to being a real bomb tech? And he said, well, they're not strong on reality. It's not as realistic as you would want to think, because this story is about a very reckless tech. And he said, we are not reckless. He said, we walk out in the middle of, in a combat zone to disarm an IED, which is different than a bomb that you knew how it was made. That's the other key thing about this new GWAT generation, and that they had to disarm improvised explosives, not just bombs that would, in the other wars they were familiar with, the way different countries, like Daniel knew how Polish bombs are made, and Jewish, German, and Spanish, but improvised is a whole nother challenge.
Yeah.
And
you don't know how that thing's going to be put together.
No, not like you could study the other in the older days. And he said, we walk out there and it's hostile. We know there's shelling going around, and we could be shot, while we're going out to do this. So we don't take this lightly. We're not reckless, which was, I thought, was a very mature thing for a 22-year-old. But they did say it's kind of a crazy job. And he goes, yeah, people tell me it's crazy, but I think it's cool. We do get to blow stuff up.
Right.
So that little kid boy thing, came through, which was kind of sweet too.
Oh man. Man, he was an amazing kid. I'll tell you what. And like I said, it takes a special breed of kid to get out there and go through all that and to learn what he had to learn and graduate, at the top of his class like that, first round through. I mean, that's just a testament to who he was.
That's that's why that word that has used about him is radical determination. He was so focused, and he would write to me letters, because in those days we wrote. And his letters were always asking me to keep him in my prayers, because it was so hard.
Oh yeah.
And of course I had no clue until I got out there and witnessed what he had studied and been there for the graduation and the tours, and it was a pretty amazing place. And they have a memorial there for all EOD. All branches go through the naval school.
Right.
So I've been out there again since. I remember the day he took me to the walls and showed me. Here he was again trying to defend what he chose. He's, look, Mom, I think it was the Army, I think, had the longest list, the most names. And then maybe Marines after that had a lot too. Navy, not as many. Air Force had the shortest little list, because everybody thinks of them as the technological, and they do have the computer operated robots that go out to do stuff. And his brothers teased him, and I know a lot of the other branches call them the chair force, and so he was trying to convince me, and it's hard that now his name is up there. And I last time I shared this, and I'd like to share it again. This is another thing
Absolutely.
that kind of describes the kind of kid he was. When he, the fall of 2009, is it 2009 or 10? No, yeah, it had to be 2000. Oh, right. He graduated in 07 from, that matters all these years. But the fall of 2009, he was coming home from his first deployment to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And when he walked in the door, before I could even get to him to give him a big hug, I noticed first that he looked different. And it wasn't that he looked different. It was there was that presence, that change in him. And I knew that he had changed. But it was good change. He stood taller, and he just it was like he glided when he walked. He
There's
had
his
a
pride.
that confidence, that and that just a calmer, quieter. You have to learn that to be a bomb
Mm-hmm.
tech.
Right.
And then when he got close to me, he just really nonchalantly kind of pulled out this flag. It's 3.5 by 5 foot when it's open flag, and he just said, "Here, Mom, this is for you," real quietly. He didn't explain it or give me any a background, and I didn't ask because I was so focused on we were celebrating his homecoming, that he was home and safe and sound and whole and alive. And so I thanked him for it, and I set it on the buffet next to his picture. And then we celebrated through tears of joy his homecoming. And a year later, in 2010, he was deployed again, and that time was to Afghanistan. And that time he did not come home, and there were no tears of joy, no celebration, just the tears of profound sadness and shock.
Right.
And that flurry of gathering the family and getting booking flights to get everybody to California for the military funeral service at Vandenberg. And I didn't do any of that because I don't remember what I did except that I couldn't breathe.
Right.
I remember having trouble breathing. And as we were leaving the house that day to catch our flights, I stopped and I went back inside and I grabbed this flag that he had given me the year before. It was still on the buffet, still next to his picture. And I just put it to my chest. And I suddenly could breathe. It was like the first time I felt like I could just, and I wouldn't let it go. Took it with me all the way to California. I travel with it now when I travel.
Good.
I don't hold it now like I did that day. I did then. It's just like, anyway, so when we were at Vandenberg in the chapel, sat in the front row, and the handsome airmen and the crisp dress blues came out and kneeled in front and handed me the large customary folded flag from a grateful nation. And then he pulled out another one of these and gave me, so I now had 2 of these. And it was during that service that the significance of this flag was explained. It turns out when Danny was in Iraq, every time he was assigned a mission and had to put on the bomb suit, they discovered he was strapping this flag to his chest. And his good buddy, Technical Sergeant John Homer, who I've gotten to know since then, he pulled Danny aside and said, "Dude, 1 ounce equals 1 pound." What he was doing there was reminding Danny what all bomb techs learn early in their training, that for every extra ounce of gear they wear inside a bomb suit, it'll feel like a pound of weight. And those suits are already, they also say pain. They say 1 ounce equals 1 pound of pain, because weight causes pain, of course. And those suits are 80 to 100 pounds already.
Right.
And because of that armor and software they're lined with, they're hot. And so they can get up to 120 degrees inside. And most techs will wear T-shirts. Well, they all do, just a T-shirt, the least amount of as they can, you know. And John weighed this and came back to Danny and said, "This is 14.5 ounces. That's 14.5 pounds that you're adding to your uniform." And he encouraged him to get a patch for his T-shirt, or then he pulled his up, or you could do a tattoo on your heart like I did, you know. And Danny respectfully declined, explaining that he was going to continue to strap that over his heart and give it to his mom when he got home. And by the time he went to Afghanistan, he was a newlywed. And so at that point, he was strapping 2 of these on, one in front of his heart and one behind, one for his mom and one for his wife. So that was 29 additional pounds of weight because of the weight of his love for his family and his country. I think it's important for me to share at this point, when I share this story, that it seems ironic, maybe, he did not die disarming a bomb. He wasn't in the bomb suit. He actually was in an area that had already been cleared, and in the T-shirt and shorts, off, you know, they were like the off-duty time, but they had cleared the area. But he stepped on a pressure plate that the combat engineers had missed. And when I share this, I like to share too that in his book, First to Fall, retired Air Force Captain Wayne G. Sales discusses how we name buildings, parks, roads, and bridges after heroes. But usually, most people aren't familiar with those names, so we tend to not think of those heroes as having lived real lives, like your son, Jimmy, and my son, Danny, or those real heroes having left behind real families like yours and mine.
Right.
And most people are familiar with the old saying, "A man dies twice. The first time is the last time his name is spoken out loud. And the second time is the last," oh, I said it wrong.
Yeah, you got a little bit backwards.
Is the last time he takes the last breath he takes in this world.
Right.
The second time is the last time his name is spoken out loud.
Right.
But our dear friend, you know him like I do, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, retired Green Beret, author and playwright, has posed an additional third death. And I agree with this. And that would be the last time the hero's story is told. Because names will fade with time. But when the name is attached to a story, we remember. That keeps them alive in our minds and our hearts, because we're wired to remember through stories. And that's why I'm so involved in storytelling and coaching it with Scott now. I also like to add about Danny that he would be mortified if he knew all the things that are now named after him.
Absolutely.
And my very favorite, or favorite isn't the right word, the one that resonates deepest in my heart is the main entrance and road leading into Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is also now known as Vandenberg Space Force Station. It was California Boulevard. It is now Senior Airman Daniel Johnson Boulevard. And it's a pretty big base. It's where our missiles, to defend our country, if we are attacked on our land, would come from there. It's where the majority of our satellites are launched. It's a satellite launch pad. So he had a lot of work as being in the bomb squad. Every time a satellite was being launched, if he was on base or if he wasn't deployed, he was on call. And when Danny was there, it was the only satellite launch pad in the world in 2010 that launched the polar satellites. You know, most of them go horizontal, but the polar ones had to be launched from Vandenberg. That meant other countries, militaries from all these other countries would come. Right. And he was always so excited when, I remember one call one night, Mom, the other countries would come, he'd be part of it,
Right.
and he'd get to meet all of the bigwigs, and the
Oh,
bigwigs
yeah.
loved the EOD, because what guy doesn't like a shop that gets of guys that get to blow stuff up, right?
Right. Right.
So he called me one night. I got to go out for beer with this Spanish general, But so that main entrance is lined with the flags of every country that has launched a satellite from that base, from that pad. So again, he'd be mortified that his name is now the name of that boulevard, and there's a memorial that's shaped like the Air Force, and with his name on it, and you see it coming and going, and at the base is a real live rocket. So it's pretty impressive. There's also in Santa Maria, which is the community he lived in then, at that time, there's a street called an avenue, Dan Johnson Avenue. And in Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, there is a park that he played at as a 10-year-old boy that is Senior Airman Dan Johnson Park. And just outside of Milwaukee is a state-of-the-art rock climbing center that's named Senior Airman Daniel James Johnson Climbing Center, because he was an avid rock climber. And so much so that when he was in Iraq, he built a climbing wall himself, and he and his team would climb in their bomb suits to stay in shape. And that's the suit I told you weighed between 100. So he had like 100 pounds already, and it would be like maybe 120 degrees inside.
Right.
And when I visited him, this would be distracting to me because I used to climb too. So I know it'd be very distracting. They're smelly.
Well, I'll bet.
He had me try one on.
They are.
Yeah. So, so anyway, I do like to encourage people to learn the stories. I encourage people with the practice I've begun since I read that First of All book. I've begun the practice of every time I walk in a building that's named after a hero, or through a park, or I'm driving down the highway and I see a sign, so-and-so Memorial Highway. Whatever I'm doing, whoever I'm talking to, I pause for a minute to say that name out loud. My grandkids have started doing it now. There's a little memorial not far from our house, and every time I make the right turn, I say this Corey Boyd, this man's name out loud. And now my granddaughter will say it every time too, and she tells everyone else, say that name.
Absolutely.
But then the next step, if you can take the time to look up the name and read their story, because stories heal us, they help us remember. And there's a quote that Scott likes to use, and I use in my workshops, from Tim O'Brien, the author of The Things They Carried. And Tim was a Vietnam veteran. And his quote is, stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours at night when you can't remember how you got to where you are from where you were. You need a story to bring that all together in your head. Stories are for eternity. And he goes on to say, for when memory's erased, which we know happens, and all that's left are stories.
Yeah, Scott's an amazing man. I'll tell you what, I don't know how that man's, I don't know when he sleeps, because he's constantly going. He's full of energy. Like you and I have both been friends with him since 2019.
Yep.
And he has become my mentor. I mean, not just the man's amazing.
Yeah.
And like you
Very
said,
much.
his work in storytelling and, the screenplays and all that, the story.
Books.
Oh, yeah,
books. So many books.
I think he just released his 5th one.
The Generosity of Scars. And
I haven't started that one yet. I'm saving it because I'm getting ready to go on vacation. I'm taking it with me. But I did finish reading the script to 11 days.
11 days, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I couldn't put it down.
Yeah,
but most of his books have that effect on me.
Yeah.
So he's amazing.
I am very, very honored and blessed to be able to work with that man, and
Yeah.
have been since 2021.
Right.
So he's been a huge gift to my family, and part of my healing and progress and ability to tell Danny's stories and to help other people now. And
Right.
that's the greatest gift he's given me, because we know that service is where, that's when we really every time I tell Danny's story now in the service of others to help them find their voice and tell
Right.
their stories, I'm a little healed a little bit more. And just,
Right.
even though they'll never be a full, but it gets better every time
Right.
when we help other people.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, could you share the story about your coffee mug with us?
Yeah, I'd love to. When Danny was 16, he was on a trip, took a trip for the summer to Europe with his youth group. And when he got home, he brought me a gift box, and he leaned in and he said, "Sorry, Mom, it's imperfect. There's some," and I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, they told me it was a second, and it was the only one they had. But the minute I saw it, I thought of you, and I had to get it." Inside the box was a pretty blue porcelain cup with pretty red flowers on it. And I remember holding it saying, "See anything imperfect about it, do you?" And he's like, "No, I don't either." And I just knew I had to get it for you. So, and all I saw at that time was just a beautiful gift from a sweet boy who loves his mom. 7 years later, that sweet boy was a courageous man serving in the United States Air Force as the EOD technician, explosive ordnance disposal, or bomb squad. And as I said before, Danny always wanted to save lives. And before he would go on deployments, after we'd hug and say goodbyes and "I love yous," he'd start walking away and he'd stop and he'd turn back and he'd say, "Remember, Mom, I'm going to save lives." And he did. He saved countless lives disarming IEDs until October 5th of 2010, when he's 7,000 miles from home on a dusty road. He stepped on a pressure plate that set off a blast. He was the only one killed in that blast, thankfully. Others were injured, sadly, but he was the only one that was killed. And in the days following that, all the color drained from my world, except for the red flowers on his cup. And I remember just every morning drinking my coffee from Danny's cup. And it became this most treasured piece of anything in my life. And everyone knew not to drink from Danny's cup or to wash it or dry it because they might break it.
Right.
there was this, but yeah, it was very treasured. The other thing about those early days is the color drained, and then the pain of his death was, for me, more than mental and emotional. There was a physical aspect. I felt like a burning inside of me, and the only way to describe it, I felt like my soul was burning from the inside out. And as time wore on, and I walked through the mourning process, which I like to differentiate a bit from grief. Grief is that over umbrella that we all will have, and for loss, any loss, we have grief. And grief, when it's a shattering and crushing loss, doesn't leave us, but it will change. Mourning is a component of grief, and our culture doesn't talk a lot about mourning. It has a lot to say about grief. Oh, grief's not linear. Grief, there's no timeline on grief. Grief never goes away. It looks different for everybody. And nobody talks in our culture about mourning and what it feels like and looks like. Whereas there are cultures who even have special names for the behaviors that people experience during mourning. In one country in Africa, it's caning. I think I'm saying it right. Where they howl. When you walk past a house in mourning, you know it. They're just they're howling out in their grief and their mourning. So, fortunately, I was in such a situation with my husband and my family that I was allowed the privilege of mourning. And I spent a long time, really a lot of crying and dealing with that sadness. And so as that happened, the fog of that pain, the fog lifted. The pain didn't go away,
Right.
but the fog did. Yeah. And as the fog lifted was right around the time I met Scott Mann. And at that time he was teaching veterans only. That's what his big thing was at that point, was teaching veterans the healing power of storytelling that he discovered during his difficult transition from the Army to civilian life. And it was so hard on him, he almost took his own life.
Right.
And during that, he discovered this. And then he said to me with his Appalachian, Arkansas accent, Holly, if you tell your story, I guarantee you'll start to heal your broken heart. And I was like, heal my heart? Tell my story? I couldn't even eat or sleep during those days of mourning. Yeah. But this man is worth trusting, as you know. So I decided to give it a shot. And in the beginning, I couldn't get the words would just stick in my throat. But because I trusted him, I kept working on it. And I discovered with each telling of my story, my heart healed a little bit more. And in the beginning days of telling our stories, where this is where my goal is helping families and veterans too. When you express your story, you're the beneficiary of how your brain will make sense of that senseless event and help you find meaning in it. It's how we're wired. It's what it happens, but then as time goes on, as I've discovered now, I use my story in the service of others now for their benefit, to understand that they can do the same thing. So, getting back to I was healing, every time a little bit more, working with Scott. And then at one point, one autumn, it was an October morning, I was drinking coffee from Danny's cup when it slipped out of my hands, thankfully. So I have no one to be angry at. Slipped, right. Porcelain cup hits ceramic tile. Should have shattered. Right. Instead, it just broke right in half. Perfectly in half. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. I can glue it back together. And my husband stopped me and he said, no, lovey, don't. That Danny's cup is the perfect metaphor for your heart that's been broken open. And because of it, your heart has a greater capacity to hold more love and give more love. So I was like, wow, good insight. So right. I nestled the two pieces together and put them on my nightstand. And they're the first thing I see every morning, last thing I see at night. And that was October. About a month later, on Veterans Day of that year, I was reading the biography of Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. World War I. He served in World War I. He was a Canadian Army surgeon. Mm-hmm. He was also the poet who wrote In Flanders Fields, that describes how poppies grew on and around the gravesides, the graves of fallen heroes, fallen soldiers. And that poem was published in 1915, and it did go viral. Even in those days, though it took a few years, so it wasn't until the 20s that poppies became the universal symbol of death on the battlefield. That same day while I was reading, I got a phone call. And when the phone call came in, I had just read that the part that John McCrae was from Guelph, Ontario. Then I took my phone call. It was from a man named Joe, a Canadian Army soldier who served with Danny in Afghanistan. This was the first time he had called me. It had been 7 years at that point. It's the first time he chose he could do it. Right. And we chatted for a while, and I invited him to meet Danny's brothers and the whole family. And before my boys were all born, and their early years were in northern Minnesota, and we gather up there now as a family time. So I invited him to join us for that. And before we hung up, I said, "So where in Canada are you from?" Thinking this huge country.
Right.
And he goes, "Well, ma'am, I'm from Guelph, Ontario." And I'm like, "What? Are you familiar with Lieutenant Colonel John?" All I got was John. He goes, "John McCrae, yeah, we've got his statue in our town square." And I'm like, wow, what a coincidence. And I was just reading about him. And I hung up, and something clicked in my brain, and I thought of Danny's cup. And I ran back to my nightstand. I picked up those 2 pieces, and I looked at those red flowers that I had been looking at now for 14 years. I'd had it since 2003. And I had been looking at them without seeing that those red flowers were poppies. And Danny's cup was covered in poppies. And in that moment, I knew consciously that Danny was always going to die on a battlefield. That was his destiny. He fulfilled his destiny. As much as it pains me, that was his path. And then I turned the cups over for some reason, where to nestle them back. And
Right.
for the first time, again, in all these years, noticed there was a tiny little blue flower on the bottom, which I wouldn't have noticed when I was drinking out of it, of course. And this tiny little blue flower didn't look anything like a poppy. And the Latin name was under it, said agapanthus. And my first thought is, okay, so this is what made it a second. I probably should have had a poppy with that Latin name under it. So I looked up agapanthus, and it turns out that's derived from 2 Greek words, anthus meaning flower, and agape, which means love, special love though, sacrificial. I looked that up again. I knew agape love, learning, Greek words, but I had to look it up again, and it actually represents a love that is selfless and sacrificial. And I thought, there was no mistake in making Danny's cup. That was meant to be.
Right.
And just like I realized then too, there was no mistake in the timing of his death. As painful as it is to my maternal heart, that was his path and his journey and his destiny. And when I came to that, when that all came together for me in my head and my heart, I felt peace, a peace that I can't describe, and a soothing of that burning, that calm balm from that burning in my soul. And a lot more healing, of course, came from that. Joe eventually visited our family, and the first night around the fire, as it got later, everybody went to bed except for my 3 surviving sons and Joe and I. And we told funny stories about the boys growing up in the Minnesota Northwoods, how when the swamps were melted, thawed, they would slosh through them and collect every creepy, crawly, slimy creature they could to torment me. And I told them about the day they were out playing in the yard. It was getting to be bedtime, and I couldn't find them in the yard. And a neighbor called to let me know to look behind the garage, because I had been calling people if they were in their yards. No, look behind your garage. Looks like there's dirt coming out of your yard, flying in the air from the garage. Like, what? To go back there, and sure enough, behind our garage was a trench, probably about 5 feet deep. They were all down there, and they were so excited to tell me they were in the middle of building a tunnel to go under the garage. So they couldn't go to bed yet. So they were we were just sharing all these crazy times. But as the night wore on and the laughter died down, Joe spoke, finally. And the first thing he wanted us to know that his recovery from war was long and difficult. And that's what took him so long to call. And he wanted us to know that he was the combat engineer that missed the IED that killed Danny. And he went on to say that in the fallout of that, he became to try and handle his sense of guilt. He became addicted to heroin and alcohol, and he attempted suicide several times and spent time in the hospital. But he was waiting till through the treatment to come and contact me. And by now he was, through the treatment, he was sober and no longer needing some of the meds that they had him on. No more hyperstartle reflex, no more, flashbacks and anxiety. He really was on a good path, except he said, there are nights like tonight. And he looked right at me and he said, when I ask myself if the wrong man came home. And I ran in the house and I came back with half of Danny's cup, the half with the blue agapanthus in it, and I placed it in his hands and I told him its story. And I said the hardest words I'd ever had to say as a mom, but I said, Joe, the right man came home. It was Danny's destiny and sacrifice. It was his fulfillment of his destiny to sacrifice his life on that battlefield, not yours. Your destiny was to come home. So welcome home, brave warrior. And he collapsed, of course, and through tears and shaking, he said, for all these years, family, friends, and professionals have tried to break through his guilt. And the last person he expected, in fact, he thought I was going to agree with him. I was going to confirm his misconstruing of that. But in fact, it was Danny's mom, as he said to me, Danny's mom with a broken cup that could break through my guilt. When I share this, then I like to read Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae's words. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Everybody has a torch.
Yes.
Mine happens to be a broken cup thrown to me from the failing hands of my son. This is the one without the flower, the half without the flower. Danny could not have known the day he bought this cup for me, that he was throwing a torch to me,
right,
and handing me a sacred destiny to be present with love, support, and hope. Hope for warriors like Joe and Scott, who come home missing pieces of their hearts that they left on the battlefield with their fallen brothers and sisters. And hope for families like yours and mine, whose beloved sons and daughters will never come home again. And I always end with, this is my torch. What's
right.
yours? Yours is G-Watt Fob.
Well,
FOB.
absolutely. And what you did for Joe is amazing. That young man needed to hear those words, but he needed to hear them from you. I can only imagine the survivor's guilt that man carried with him. And, I've had a few of the guys that served with my boy Jimmy has contacted me over the years. And some of them, it took a few years.
Right.
And, some of them I still stay in contact with, and some of them's, gone on with life and started a family, and they got their own little thing going on. So I still check on them on occasion, try and keep up with what they're doing. But if you're a combat veteran out there watching this episode, and you had a brother or sister lost on the battlefield, just know that their families are approachable, and they would love to hear from you, because it means the world to us. I know it did me. I know it did you. I'm in touch with several Gold Star families here in the area where I'm at, and it's the same. We need to hear from you. So
There's no greater gift.
absolutely,
There's no greater gift anyone could give us than
absolutely,
those of you who loved our sons and daughters to reach out to us.
absolutely.
Just say
We need
hi.
your stories
Yes.
about our loved ones.
Yes.
That means the world to us, like you said. So, if you're watching, track that mother, that father, that wife, that child, track them down, and get in touch with them. Give them those stories. So, I'll tell you what, it's just like I said, what you did for that young man it was very much needed, and it took a lot of courage on his part to even reach out to you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was desperate. He was
yeah,
desperate to get an answer one way or the other. He wasn't believing what others were telling him, so he thought he could confirm his own false belief
right,
through me. And it turned out, obviously, that the false belief was shattered.
right,
And it was, I think it was Danny's tender, precious heart that made him sensitive to, I'm going to buy that cup for my mom.
yeah,
I don't care if it's a second. And here, like I said, it was all meant to be. So it was such a gift
absolutely,
from Danny. That's the other thing that Joe has come to, it's like, wow, this is from Danny.
yeah.
The kid I thought I was responsible for his death. It was through him that we made sense, and it was through story, telling the story. And as I told the story to myself and to Scott, to friends, and it all just made sense. Our brains work that way.
All right. And can you give us a little insight as to how Danny's death affected his siblings?
It's been hard, as I know because
Yeah.
you have the other son and daughter too. So my two oldest ones, to be honest, I don't think they have come to their terms with it yet. They were babies were being born. In fact, between the wedding, right before the wedding, Danny had a wedding, as I mentioned. He was the newlywed. He got married in June of 2010. He was killed in October of 2000. Two babies were born right before the wedding and right before the funeral. And so they were newlyweds too, and they had these little babies, and then they got busy raising their families and starting their careers. Obviously it hurt them. I know they struggle. One of my sons has some struggles with what he says he struggles with, a deep sadness, obviously. But I don't think he's really he doesn't talk about it. He did let me in on it, but very little. And another one had sleeping problems, of course. They missed their brother. But my youngest one, a couple of years ago, well, actually 3 years after Danny was killed, he went into the Army himself, which in and of itself, to me, was huge. I was impressed. Most friends and family were all upset. How can you let him do that? It's like, I have no choice. He was already,
Right.
he was in his 20s.
We don't have a choice in that matter.
No, they do what they're going to do.
Right.
But I supported it because his attitude was, for one thing, I was impressed with his courage after that.
Right.
And then he wanted to experience what Danny did, which was an incredible growth as I had shared. Danny just shined in the military, just did so much, and Eric wanted that same opportunity, and he has a heart for people, and he wanted to make a difference, and I thought it was a wonderful thing. He did serve 6 years. It didn't go the way he had hoped, and he was never deployed, not even once, which had its own, his brother died on a battlefield. He had this, he didn't say it this way, but a lot of people could sense it. Like he was going to he was going to finish the job, so to speak. He was going to pick up that ball and go out there and do what his big brother did. And the military didn't give him that. And so he ended his contract in 2020, which was not a good time for the whole world. And so he was isolated and not able to really deal with all of that was going on in his head. And a few years later, his depression, he experienced tremendous. We knew he was going through depression and anxiety, didn't know what it was from, didn't understand it or how to help, because he hadn't been on a battlefield. What's going on? I knew that there was that isolation, and he missed a big chunk of life that his friends who didn't go into the military all got, dating and marriage and kids. And all of a sudden he's just, what do I do now? And I thought it was that, but it turned out it was far deeper than that. He called me eventually from the Superior National Forest, because he lives up in northern Minnesota where they were all born. And one afternoon he called me from there. I could tell he didn't have his dog with him, because he always called me when he was walking his dog. And I said, why aren't you walking Walter? So I left him in a good place. I'm like, well, why would you go for a walk without Walter? And it was because he decided he wasn't going to go home. He had a gun, and he started crying. He told me, I'm too afraid to pull the trigger. And there was a moment I was so thankful for fear. Fear has its place.
Right.
In the right setting. But what he finally came out with was that he felt like he should have been the one to be killed in action, and not his brother, who was married. And he felt like he had the life to sacrifice, and it tore him apart. So yeah, survivor's guilt can show up, and here I am working with veterans and that were there when their brothers and sisters died. I had no thought that my own sons might feel the same way. I've never, that they would feel, that guilt of surviving past their brother. And maybe the two older might feel it even more, because this was their younger brother. But I've been told by the wives that they don't want to tell me what's going on in their hearts and their souls, because they know how devastated I was by Danny's death, and they think it'll hurt me. And it will. It hurt me terribly to be on the phone with my child telling me what he was going through. But of course I was, able to hang up and get there. We were there, and we with a lot of wonderful support through Scott and our team, were able to provide a really wonderful opportunity for Eric at a private nonprofit retreat center for veterans. And they're there. And I think a key lesson from this story is for us to know, to carry survivor's guilt, it doesn't have to just be, you don't have to have been on the battlefield and watched them die. And like the siblings, boy, there's not a lot of recognition and accolades and support for siblings. They're just suddenly they've lost the person they're closest to in the whole world. Eric had known Daniel from the time he was born, of course. And so he has memories that even his other brothers don't have, that he has with Daniel, that no one else has, that they carry alone, like your son Johnny carried memories alone.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about that and bring that up, because a lot of people, they see what the parents go through, they see what the spouse goes through, but they never see what the siblings or the children go through.
Right.
And
Right.
with my organization, we do see that. And, and I knew about your son, Eric, and, I shared with you, last week, about my youngest son, Johnny, being so close to his brother, Jimmy. Jimmy was the oldest of the three, and Johnny was the middle. And he went into a very, very deep, dark depression and never did come out of it. And he ended up being diagnosed with multiple personalities. And, he didn't work for a long time. And, he had a wife and 2 sons of his own.
Mm.
And 3 years ago, Groundhog's Day, we lost him because he drank himself to death. So, there are, excuse me. Sorry about that. I thought I had that turned off. But, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to kind of bring all that to the forefront, to let our audience know that, it's not just us as the ghost of our parents or a spouse or the significant other. The children and the siblings take it just as hard, if not harder, than we do, and it affects them as well. So I want to thank you for sharing Eric's story, because I know that you had told me about that before, and I wanted it, brought up to the forefront. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for what you do, Jim. This just, I'm guessing too, like you've referenced veterans watching this too. I know that they hurt in ways that they don't, and this is where, if we can be a support to them.
Absolutely.
There are some of Danny's friends that served with him who actually have, as I told you before, have touched base with me, but I've been told by some of them, like a mother of one of them said, it hurts him so much. He feels so horrible that he's afraid to come to me, afraid to talk to me, that he'll hurt me more, and then he'll feel more guilt. And it's just, how do we break through that, or, the 2 guys that were on EOD, they're really small teams. They work on teams of 3. So as we talked last week, he didn't have like a platoon or a battalion or whatever, a company.
Right.
And these 3 were attached to the Army and to the Canadian allies, and they were only there with them for a week before this happened. So, but the 2 he worked with, super close to, and they're carrying such a load. One was injured terribly physically, and the other one mentally, from the waves of the blast, and both of them in their hearts spiritually from losing Danny. They loved him. And for us to just remember, and for other veterans too, to, as they, everybody says it now all the time, but to check on each other.
Absolutely.
And those who, I mean, if I know, these guys, I know, they know to contact me, but I don't want to bug them, because sometimes I think I trigger some of their pain.
And that's possible.
Uh-huh.
So it's like you said, there's a few of them that I keep in contact with, and unfortunately, there's been 6 of them so far that I know of that have taken their own life. So they're hurting just as much, if not more, as well. So if you're out there and you're watching, and you're in that situation, please get the help that you need. I mean, reach out to your local VA, get you a therapist, whatever you got to do, get that help.
Or find a story workshop and tell your story.
There you go. Look up Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. Take
Rooftop Leadership.
Yeah, take his rooftop
Passport
leadership
clinical.
course and his
Yeah.
storybook classes, and, find
He's,
something. Find something
yeah.
that fits you that helps you get through this. I mean, you can get into the arts. I interviewed a young man a month or so ago, another Afghanistan veteran, took 10 bullets over there, lived through it, and he started out in adaptive sports,
Oh, yeah.
and he got into archery, and he competed in the Paralympics.
Mm.
And then when COVID rolled through and hit, that kind of put everything on hold, and he no longer had that outlet, and he picked up a guitar and taught himself to play. He taught him
Music.
he taught
Oh,
himself how to write songs,
wow.
and he's living down in Nashville now. He's an upcoming country music star.
Oh,
Uh,
that's awesome.
he's played the Grand Ole Opry 3 or 4 times now. He's hosted the CMA Awards. Young man by the name of Scotty Hastings, and he's just a phenomenal guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal guy. He's got some great music. His a lot of his songs that he has written are stories about his time in Afghanistan. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the songs that's one of my favorites that he wrote, it's called "How Do You Choose," and it's a story that he wrote about the first time he went to a fallen friend's graveside after he returned from Afghanistan. Just a phenomenal guy. So
I'm going to look it up. I wrote it
yeah,
down.
absolutely. Look him up. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. So
Yeah.
yeah, look him up. He's done great work, and it's working for him. And I'm trying to get him here because he's actually from Cincinnati. He's a Cincinnati boy.
Good.
So I'm trying to get him to
Wow.
come up here and play a little music for us. So Scotty, if you're watching, I'm not giving up. Oh,
Music
wow.
is very healing.
Yes, absolutely. And that's going back to, find something that you can be passionate about
Yeah.
and that heals you.
Service.
Absolutely.
Once you have gone through your morning, I think one of the things that I try to encourage people to keep in mind is that when you're in those early, I think, well, I know this was my experience, and I've talked to others who said, yeah, they get like early on, we know service is healing. We know it's helpful. And we right away, because the initial pain is so awful, we want to get past it.
Right.
Let me be there for someone else as soon as I can.
Right.
And if you haven't dealt with your own yet, that will wear you out and just overwhelm you and drain you. But if you
Absolutely.
take the time to mourn your loss,
Yeah.
and whatever, whatever that looks like, crying, reflection, how there are many ways that might seem pretty selfish, but you have to do it. It's a way our souls heal.
Right.
And our soul, I feel like my soul has healed. I talked about that burning, the peace, the balm, the soothing, that is healed. My maternal heart will always have that break,
Right.
in this world. But once we get through that, then when we serve others, oh my gosh, it's invigorating, as I know it's when you're helping someone else, it's exhilarating versus draining.
Yeah. And I think I shared with you last week when we talked that, I get people all the time come up to me and they'll say, how do you do it? How do you deal with that? And I said, listen, it's what I'm doing right now is my therapy. It's therapy for me to go out there and take my negative, turn it into a positive, and help others. So,
Yep.
and
It's
I know that you feel the same way, with your storytelling and everything. I know that you've been a tremendous help to other Gold Star families, working with Scott and, Last Out and the Pineapple Express and everything.
And now I've taken on a new role on the for-profit side on Rooftop Leadership. I'm now coach for the Take the Mic program.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's just starting. So it's a little daunting
right.
to say the least, but it's exciting. It's like, wow. Again, I look at, and it's all because of a gift from Danny, that I found a new calling for the later season in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or share with us, or anything that we didn't discuss? Or
I'll just leave one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know whoever said it. A lot of these old quotes get misquoted. They say the wrong people anyway. So, but this one resonates deeply for me, and I think it will for you too. If you've probably already heard it, is that oftentimes God uses our greatest pain to launch us on our greatest calling.
Absolutely. That's a good one. So, all right, then. Well, I want to thank you for coming back on the show again.
Thank you.
It's
always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, same here. Same here. In fact, I've got sometime this evening, I got another Gold Star father that I've just got a phone number for that I need to reach out to and get a hold of. He's actually a father of one of the 13 from Abbey Gate. So it's everything's fairly fresh for him. So I told him I'd give him a call. So
awesome.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end this. And again, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and for all of you out there watching. If you're looking for a good story coach, Holly's probably available.
Check out Take the Mic right now, or
there you go.
Just go to Rooftop Leadership, or I'm on LinkedIn. And that's how we met through Scott.
But we met through Scott. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to help somebody, and I do that too on the side with people who can't pay the price for the big workshops. But,
right.
Yeah.
So, all right. With that, we'll go ahead and end this, but hang around for a second.
Okay.
It's 2010. It's approximately 18:30 in the evening here at Forward Operating Base Forest. Please tell me your name and your rank, sir.
My name's Corporal Jimmy Robinson.
Congratulations, you just got promoted here. First time being promoted away from the States?
No, I got promoted to PFC during my first deployment.
So this is your second deployment, is that right?
Actually, my third.
Your third. One in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I've done 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan.
All right, tell me, what's your job?
My job, I'm a fire team leader, Alpha team leader under Sergeant Riley.
And how old are you, sir?
27.
How long have you been in the Army?
I've been in a little bit over 5 years.
Where do you hail from?
Originally from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Home of the Bengals, is that right?
That's right.
I was speaking with Sergeant Riley earlier, and he spoke quite highly of you. You guys look like you have a really tight group here.
Yeah, it's we're all really close. We're all pretty good friends across the board.
You have family back home?
Yeah, I've got a wife and 2 kids back at Fort Campbell.
Congratulations, and their names?
Thank you. My wife's name's Kate, and my oldest daughter is Emily, and youngest is Tori.
Anything you want to say to them?
I love you guys. I miss you.
Very good. Corporal Robinson, congratulations on your promotion.
All right, thank you very much.
And be safe out here.
I'll try.
It's Jim Sperry, August 15, 2010, at the promotion of Corporal Robinson. Corporal, what's your first name again?
It's Jimmy.
Jimmy. That's an easy name to remember. My name's Jim.
It works, huh?
All right, roger that, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Congratulations.